So on to extra procedures, and thanks a lot for Partha and the entire scientific committee for giving me this opportunity. Just one minute. So what I need to talk in the next few minutes is extra procedures, when and where, and combining it with laser vision correction and cross-linking. What is happening? Sorry. What happened? Literature search of cross-linking with laser vision correction has definitely unraveled some encouraging factuals. Like, it's not that anything very drastic or daring is happening. Yes, it needs refinements of protocols to keep it stable and consistent. So essentially, the challenge which brought this procedure in is that this challenge of a probable ectasia happening in some of these post-refractive surgery eyes. And we know that the risk factors increase if you're treating a higher refractive error, if your corneal thickness is less, if you have a thin residual bed, if you have borderline topographies, but they're not formed frustrated keratoconus, they're just a suspicion of inferior superior asymmetry or a suspicious posterior float or a borderline bad display. You cannot label them as an early KC. And again, those eyes which have allergic manifestations and are prone to rubbing, or a family history of keratoconus, or of course, pregnancy and hormonal imbalances, extra procedures seem to make sense. Again, we know that both ectasia regression are a form of corneal biomechanical weakening. So we need to understand why LASIK extra, SMILE extra, or PRK extra could probably be a solution of sorts. Of course, we need to be sure about the safety, efficacy, refractive accuracy, which seems to be quite promising as we go on. And what we need to define is the amount of cross-linking time. The favorable arguments, however, are that incident of iatrogenic ectasia is not much. It's just about 0.02 to 0.6%. So why do you need to cross-linking? Combine it with laser vision correction. But we have also started understanding there is this low expression of lysyl oxidase, which could have a contributive role. We do know that we are sometimes treating a little higher power in a thinner cornea, not exactly very thin, not like how we used to be before, but there are certain eyes which have a chance of regression, and there are certain borderline corneas which are at risk. So then, what are your concerns about the prevalent cross-linking protocols? We essentially want to know that there should not be more flattening of the cornea. Yes, there would be some amount of compactness of the lamellae, but that doesn't stay for long. There may be a mild haze, but what is most important is there should not be a refractive impact, and quantitative impressions with the Corvus and the ocular response analyzer does seem to augur for a better biomechanics. So how is the surgical procedure? Different published articles indicate that if you're doing a PRK extra, you could do an epithelial debridement, though there have been some papers with transepithelial PRK, some have still continued to use alcohol to remove the epithelium. Again, some have even used Vibex Rapid in the different papers, but largely more of them have used 0.2 to 0.25% without dextran Vibex Extra. Again, the duration of time has been fluctuating from 19 seconds to even 15 minutes. And again, the UV radiation has been 30 milliwatts per centimeter square for 90 seconds. Largely, majority of the people have looked at 2.7 joules per centimeter square, but there have been some which have used it for a longer time. Mitomycin has been advised at 0.02% for 20 seconds, and definitely a bandage contact lens. When it comes to LASIK extra, the concept was to create a flap, raise the flap, do your correction, and then invert it like a taco, apply riboflavin for different durations of time by different papers, wash it off and reposit the flap. And it was seen that the energy protocols were largely 30 milliwatts per centimeter square for 45 to 90 seconds. But again, the total energy has varied in some studies from 1.4 to 5.4 millijoules. So in other words, there was not an exact consensus on the final protocol. Again, with SMILE extra, the energy protocols have been largely 30 milliwatts per centimeter square for 90 seconds, but there have been a few with 45 milliwatts for 90 seconds. And again, delivering total energy was a little fluctuating. So again, when you look at the ectasia rate, you want to know, why do you want to do it? we do understand there is minimal long-term data available. But when it comes to regression, we have a lot more positive understanding. We do know that if you could cross-link this cornea, make it biomechanically stronger, we at least know that cross-linking has come to stand. But if you could bring in a little better biomechanical strength, if you could reduce the epithelial remodeling and hyperplasia, doesn't it make sense? So then it seemed to mandate that we look at the extra procedures, and there were 10 papers which came in about myopia and 3 of hyperopia. When you looked at the results in myopia, the results were comparable, but probably it showed in majority of the papers that there was a slightly better uncorrected visual acuity at 1 year. However, that was not very consistent. When you looked at hyperopia, it was definitely showed significantly better results in the extra group and lesser regression. In fact, there's this study of Kanellopoulos. Of course, he has done a lot more work on the hyperopia and regression. This was a 2-year study where he showed that the LASIK extra eyes definitely continued to be stable over 2 years as compared to eyes which underwent LASIK treatment alone. If you looked at the SMILE extra, there were 4 popular studies, but what was promising was the refractive efficacy with SMILE extra was definitely indicated stability, efficacy, and predictability. And there were even improved biomechanical indices in all of these papers. However, the energy was variable, ranging from 2.7 to 5.4. This 5.4 joules was seen in Hernandez study, et al. Study, where he had 15 of his eyes which had FFKC, where he has used this energy. These eyes, of course, did not progress to ectasia, which was followed up for 24 months. But some of these eyes had increased interface haze, which were clinically significant, but however resolved, that haze disappeared in 3 months. So then, what do you understand about efficacy of CXL in these combined procedures? Definitely, you should not do a conventional method because that might cause a little more of flattening. Yes, look at the accelerated cross-linking. We also need to understand, it didn't seem to make sense to combine LASIK extra far too much, excepting when you're looking at regression and hyperopic regression, because the flap anyway doesn't contribute to the biomechanical strength. What is the sense in creating a flap and then going and cross-linking it? Again, there's some query about SMILE. The epithelium is intact, so there is going to be a reduced efficacy of cross-linking. So there is no head-to-head studies available yet. There was one case of ectasia which was seen in a young hyperop following cross-linking. But largely, none of the papers showed any refractive impact or anything deleterious as far as visual stability was concerned. The efficacy and safety index actually were better or comparable in all of these studies, and the keratometric stability was noted in all extra procedures as a uniform pattern. The other things which you get to know is there is no need to adjust your nomograms. MMC with PRK had to be used to counter haze. It seems to make sense not to avoid flap shrinkage, but what was interesting in a study paper was that the riboflavin which diffused into the superficial underlying stroma augured for a better flap adherence in all of these eyes. So essentially, the message which comes across is we have to be judicious in our selection of cases. And one thing encouraging is there were very few cases of keratitis or DLK or toxic keratopathy, which you might think. So there are certain definite arguments for the biomechanical compromise, which does occur in refractive surgery. There is tissue subtraction. LASIK extra definitely looks at the vertical cuts we are creating on the flap. There is a weakening there. SMILE extra also causes a delamination cut. Bowman's membrane disruption does occur in PRK. But if you look at how the biomechanics healing occurs, you definitely know that PRK fares better compared, then comes SMILE and then comes LASIK. PRK seems to be a more logical argument for extra procedures when you try to think about it as entire picture. An ocular response analyzer and Corvis data has been supportive. The arguments for regression management is, we've heard our previous talk about epithelial mapping and how epithelial hyperplasia does occur. And it goes without saying that when you do a cross-linking, epithelial hyperplasia has been noted to be lesser. There is a tightening effect of the lamellae. There is an increased rigidity and compactness of the stroma. And that is why you don't need to be looking at anti-glaucoma medication when you have cross-linked these eyes. So the need of the hour for us is to look at cross-linking for higher refractive corrections and thinner corneas. And we need to also question ourselves that cross-linking in LASIK extra and SMILE extra is still questionable because of the inadequate oxygen with this epithelial barrier. And also understand there is some amount of edema of the flap and the cap, which has been created by the primary procedure. But largely, there's supportive evidence with the duration of studies have been over 2 years that ectasia, this is definitely encouraging. And we also have to accept that ectasia could develop over years. PRK seems to be promising. In fact, there have been gain in lines which have been noted in the extra group, although we can't conclude on that. There is no delayed healing of the epithelial defect in the PRK extra group, no endothelial loss, maybe a temporary haze in few which has settled in 3 months. So, of course, the message is that we do not transgress into form fruste keratoconus. We need to keep half the energy protocols to avoid a refractive impact. We need to avoid haze. We need to use mitomycin C. Probably we have to counsel patients on a case-by-case basis because CXL is more prophylactic. It's not a therapeutic measure here. We have to use risk counseling and further studies, and rather more uniform protocols are what is needed. As far as hyperopia is concerned, the results have been encouraging, and there is a distinct role of extra procedures in the armamentarium of refractive surgeries. And that is something I would leave you all with to think and ponder.